Bring it back to the board for discussion and or a motion. Ms. Arnold?
Yes. I'd like to ask the chair to pull under legislative goals number 1 from the rest of the legislative platform for a separate vote.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion? Supervisor Hill?
Yeah, I'd like actually Supervisor Arnold to explain why she wants to oppose that and comment on Mr. Greening's comments about CEQA reform. I agree that, I actually think that there are, and I think they've been identified by people who are very experienced, things that can be done to improve CEQA from both perspectives, but creating something that just allows CEQA favoritism seems silly. I mean, they used it, I guess, to help to create a football stadium, which I'm not really sure under what, what sort of planning that does. I mean, it seems it's just an opportunity which we've seen before, including from people in the legislature that represent our area in the past, putting forward projects to be listed on CEQA favoritism lists rather than actually saying, here's some aspects of the law that make it unduly onerous and difficult and in some cases actually project killing. I think that those things can be addressed, and so I guess the streamlined part does concern me, only in the sense that I wouldn't want it to lead to what Mr. Greening has identified, and I think most people see as a possibility from the legislature, which is just, everybody saying, here's a project in my district that will mean a lot, and let's find a way to exempt it. So I agree.
Mr. Gibson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Mr. Hill has stated the issues well here. Certainly the question of CEQA reform was one of the hot topics at the CSAC board meeting last week, although we didn't go into it in a lot of depth, because the proposals are just now rolling out. But I agree, there are aspects of CEQA in Mr. Hill's terms that are unduly onerous. I think it gets in the way of getting good projects done. In fact, projects beneficial to the environment sometimes founder a bit on some CEQA process. So I think that our plank of seeking reform is correct. I think we then look very carefully at what is specifically brought forward. I wanted to also just point out to colleagues and thank Mr. Yoder and admin staff for getting in under the general government provisions. It's the first one, the first item A. It says page 11 of 29 on our strikeout version that we are going to work to try to get the state senior and disabled citizens property tax postponement program back in place. I've had conversations with Assemblyman Ashajian, and apparently there are other legislators who are interested in moving this forward. Not quite clear whether that's a 2013 kind of issue or maybe more like 2014, but this is a program that allows senior and disabled individuals to defer their property tax, let it accumulate, at which point a lien is placed on the property that's cleared when the property is sold. The state makes the county whole, and as a means of keeping people in their housing and a means of keeping people productive in our communities, it had what I think of as quite an outsized positive effect relative to its cost. So it's an issue that I think is very much important to the community of Los Osos. I look forward to working with the legislators and through CSAC to see if we can get this moving forward again. And again, we'll just sort of stay tuned one way or another. And as to the debate on the ledge item number 1, the vote threshold, I'll engage that at appropriate point.
Okay. Supervisor Arnold, do you have a response?
I would just like to vote on this issue separately, and
Can we ask why?
I believe that the 2/3 requirement requires our government to be more accountable to the public and bring forward a good argument providing the need to increase taxes, and I think that's important to be passed.
How so? I mean, we don't have two-thirds requirement to elect legislators. We don't have two-thirds requirement to elect supervisors, councilpersons, members of councils. We don't have a two-thirds requirement to do just about anything. We don't have a two-thirds requirement to elect the President of the United States. Or we have simple majorities. In fact, I think 55% doesn't even make sense. I think we had simple majorities in the country. And in fact, the Republican view of government, dating back to our founding fathers, is that we elect people who are going to spend their time being best informed and making the best decisions for the most people possible, not to just be reflections of a certain kind of mentality that may not be in the short or long term. For instance, the initiative that required two-thirds, and now of course we know we do have two-thirds with the exception, once the special elections take place, that'll go back in the legislature, has pretty much paralyzed California state government because of that. It seems that if you don't like what you're representing, I mean, we're not even asking for the powers, simple majority, for the elected officials to decide on increases like they do in other states. We're saying that the people itself, and we've seen in this particular county, which we hear a lot of talk on who represents who, that even in the last election, 54% of this county, much more than a simple majority, slightly under 55%, voted for Proposition 30, which passed and has led to an enormous amount of things moving forward and was supported by a lot of people except for you. So I guess my question continues to be, as you pose this, what's the governance principle behind requiring two-thirds of the voters to pass a tax to see if they want to support their libraries? I mean, we have simple majorities for everything else. They don't require you to be elected by two-thirds, nor anyone else that's involved in the decision-making process, and we're not even the people who decide whether a simple majority tax or any kind of assessment would occur to support libraries or transportation or other things. It's just whether the voters themselves would. And as elected officials, part of our responsibility is to be educators of public opinion, not simply to be receptors of limited public opinion.
Mr. Gibson.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would defer Supervisor Hill to address Supervisor Arnold directly. If she'd like to respond, I'd be happy to hear that. My comments are that I agree with Supervisor Hill that the widespread application of the two-thirds majority has paralyzed California in a lot of places. And that was a motivating factor for instance, school districts to reduce their vote threshold to 55%, something that has been supported by a wide number of, a wide margin of the population in the state. It has worked well for the schools. With that has come a system of oversight and an efficiency that has been, I think, crucial to preserving the schools to the extent that they have been preserved. And goodness knows they've been under quite a lot of assault. So as we look at this piece of our legislative platform, the intent here is to get this in front of the voters. Let us get this in front of the voters. We can't go wrong listening to the voters in terms of what they want to do about their local jurisdiction and at larger scales as well. So I think this is a conversation that needs to happen. I think at the state level, I think this is an initiative that needs to get before the voters of California. And I think it would be good for this county to get to a place where, just like the school districts, 55%, which any elected official would declare virtually a mandate in their own election, should be absolutely the way that we move forward. So I'm supportive of leaving it in, and I think it's been in our platform for some time. I think we need to continue there.
Thank you, Supervisor Gibson. Supervisor Meacham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll quickly just reflect on this, and I'm going to take a no position on this one until we hear back from our legislative folks with COG, because there were a number of questions that were raised there, and from what we were told, there's a lot of bills outstanding. Now, from a local standpoint, I agree with you guys about trying to allow for libraries, transportation, things that we need to do locally. My concern goes to the state level. If there are bills out there that are going to directly affect us based upon these bills that are, and I don't even know what they are at this point. That's what I'm really curious to see. Until I see what they're going to try to do, how does that affect us locally? That's where my concern lies. But the initial suggestion here from a local standpoint, I really don't have an issue with that, because if we want to do something with our libraries, we want to do something with our roads, we're trying to take care of business for ourselves, because we can't wait for everybody else to come and rescue us from anything, so we need to do that here locally. But I know that there are a lot of other bills out there right now that I'm anxious to hear where these are going and how they would affect us, if in fact they would. They may not, and I don't know that.
Thank you, Supervisor Beach and Supervisor Arnold.
Yes, we're talking about a threshold for taxation here, and I still believe that when government does a good job identifying a need and puts forward good legislation, that the voters do respond, 2/3 majorities. An example here locally is our Los Osos sewer, and I'll just repeat my request that I would like to put on this.
Supervisor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, getting back to Mr. Meacham, if you look at the way this is worded, Mr. Meacham, I'm again looking in our legislative goals, 5 of 29, and on our consolidated agendas, it's page 225. It says local. It says support legislative or initiative efforts that would modify the vote threshold requirement for local. I think it should say for local, voter approved, library funding, gasoline. We can reword the thing, but it's very clear that it speaks to local. And as such, I don't think it's in any conflict with your concerns as to what's happening at the state level that might affect us separately. So maybe we could wordsmith that to meet your satisfaction. Support legislative or initiative efforts which would modify the vote threshold requirement for local, voter-approved library funding, gasoline and sales taxes from 2/3 to 55%. I think that speaks exactly to what you want.
It does, to a certain extent, but once again, I mean, there was a lot of discussion about this at the COG board. We had 12 members there that seemed to want to know more about what the state's doing. I understand our proposal, and I understand, and I'm supportive of the issue of the local library. As long as there's a local emphasis on allowing for us in San Luis County to do this, I don't have an issue with it. But once again, I don't know if bills that will be introduced at the state level can change that. I don't know. But if this is just strictly to put it before the voters, to ask them, is this what you want to do locally, I have no problem.
Okay, well, it's consistent, I think, then here with what you were saying philosophically about the local, and even at the state thing, which is not part of this in terms of what the legislature and the governor might or might not be able to do. I guess it's worth reminding that, you know, once another special election takes place, which most people agree will just restore the supermajority, the majority of the state has spoken and has elected a supermajority in the legislature, partly, I think, because it's reflective of the philosophical values of the state, regardless of what is now ultimately a minority of interests that are trying to, essentially what you have in 2/3 is the rule of the superminority. I don't understand why, you know, the rule of superminority should take place over that's not the way it works anywhere else in any form of our government. And it has been, you know, I always said all along that, you know, if the 2/3 of the Democrats do a lousy job, then the voters should vote them out and vote in new 2/3. But I'd like to get rid of 2/3 altogether because it's been nothing but a disaster for the state. So you know, I think philosophically it's important for us. This is ultimately just a symbolic thing, our legislative platform in some cases. I think symbolically most of us understand when our local cities pass sales tax increases and so forth to help fund their needs, whether it be fire stations or new police stations or all sorts of things that we need, whether it be supporting our libraries. I think these are things that we should stand behind. So I'll be happy to vote yes if that's required on a separate motion and do so.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we just simply straw vote this particular item of the
Agenda, please. Ms. Arnold?
I just wanted to repeat again that when we're supporting a legislative platform, we're supporting unidentified pieces of legislation. So support legislation or initiative efforts which we don't know what those we don't even know what those bills are unless we're supporting them individually. And again, I'll repeat, historically, when government identifies a need and the legislation is written well, 2/3 of the people, we've seen that happen often where they step forward and vote by 2/3 majority vote taxes on themselves.
Just happened.
Okay. Mr. Gibson?
I was just saying we could, you know, take a motion on this particular item, and then let's see if it's in or out of the ledge platform, and let's move forward.
Okay. Call for the vote.
Well, we don't have,
All motion.
I'll move we retain item 1 of our legislative initiative. In fact, yeah, let me approve the legislative platform as staff has recommended.
Second.
That's the whole package,
Okay.
everything that speaks to all the different things.
Okay. Call for a voice vote on that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
No kidding.
Roll call, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Meacham?
I'm going to vote yes on the platform with the exception of that item number 1, and I'm going to take a no position on that at this point.
I'm making a note. Ms. Arnold?
Yes, I'll be voting to accept the legislative platform with the exception of item number 1.
And Mr. Teixeira?
Same for me, I still have questions about that.
And when you're saying item 1, you're actually referencing legislative goal number 1? And are we also changing the language as referenced before?
The motion, Madam Clerk and Mr. Chairman, the motion was to accept the legislative platform as presented. We have myself, Mr. Hill, Mr. Meacham voting yes that I heard. And they made commentary as to their rejection of one particular piece of it. So that's what I heard.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I might, maybe it would make this more simple, just vote separately on that one item. I mean, if you're going to vote, let's take the vote on the legislative platform. If you want to do that again, we can do
We
that.
have a motion to accept the legislative platform as presented.
Down.
One more time.
As presented?
Presented.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Meacham?
No,
Ms. Arnold?
No.
Mr. Teixeira?
I'd like, Mr. Chair, may I make a motion, please, to accept the legislative platform with the acceptance of legislative goals, item number 1.
Second.
I'd like to make a comment because I think it's important to understand that these objections, these ideological objections, are not representative of this county, and they're certainly not representative of this state, and I know that they're pleasing to some people's friends, but that's not how you govern.
Under discussion, Mr. Chairman. I will support this motion, even as I'm disappointed to see this perfectly reasonable legislative initiative leave the platform at this point. But there's so many other good things in this platform that we need to give direction to our legislative representatives or representatives in Sacramento on that. I will support the motion.
Thank you. Supervisor Arnold?
Under discussion, I just want to repeat that we are voting right now to accept this legislative platform, just removing legislative goals, item number 1.
For further consideration. Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion?
Can I clarify on one to be clear? If our motion is to remove that item, then it would also include the renumbering of the goals as well.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Ms. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira?
Yes.
Mr. Meacham?
I'm going to take a no position. I've explained why.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
No.
Okay. We move to the next item.